So last time, I don't know if you guys remember, but I was discussing crime and IQ. So I finally have the statistics that I needed, and as you can see on the screen, 61 out of 100,000 Asians about commit violent crime, and 182 out of 100,000 whites commit crime, and 556 out of 100,000 blacks commit crime. So when they talk about per capita, they're usually talking about one in every 100,000. As you can see from these numbers, I have my phone on me. I can do the math right quick. 64 times 3, well, actually 61. So 61 times 3 is 183. That's saying that whites commit crime at about 3 times the rate of Asians. And 182 times 3 is 546, so close to 556. That's saying that blacks commit crime at 3 times the rate of whites. So that's where I got my figures from the last episode. And this next screenshot is basically saying the same thing, and it's just saying that 2.5 blacks are 2.5 more likely to get arrested for violent crime. They're about 2 times more likely to get arrested for property crime, so not as big of a difference, but they're 4 times more likely to get arrested for drug-related offenses. And then the same is true of blacks compared to whites as whites compared to Asians, because this is saying Asians are 0.5 times as likely as whites to be arrested for violent crime. They're 0.6 times as likely as whites to be arrested for property crime, and they're 0.7 times likely to be arrested for drug-related offenses. So these are the statistics. This is from 2020, and so is the other slide. Also with crime, this one doesn't have Asians, but it's showing that when people discuss crime, they say it's just, not people, some people say it's just racial, and I would say that's mostly the Republicans or the conservatives. And then some people say it's all socioeconomic, and that's mostly the liberals and people on the left. So my stance is that it's both. And after showing you guys the data earlier about crime in general, this is showing you a comparison of whites and blacks, and it shows whites and blacks, but it also shows their parents' income level. So it's showing you race, but also showing you socioeconomics. So as you can see from this, the rate that people are committing crimes is going down as people become wealthier. So that's the left's argument that it's social. But you can also see it's going down from different starting places based upon race. So that's what the conservatives are saying. So if you look at this graph, there's a significant fall from blacks to whites because it's dropping from almost, 21 to 1. And from whites, it's starting at 6 and dropping to almost 0. So there is a racial component and there's also a social component. I think this red is showing a comparison, and for some reason, as it's going down for blacks and going down for whites, it's going down slightly more for whites, but I don't think that's a big issue. Outside of just crime, homicide is a big issue for a lot of Americans, and I believe that's because most people probably don't care about fraud. People do care about armed robberies and carjackings, but what really scares people, and when people talk about they're fearful of crime, I think they're concerned with murder. So as you can see from this data, it's broken down black, Hispanic, Asian, white, Asian as most statistics. And when you look at it, you'll see that, again, like the previous graph showed, as you're going down, as you're going up in poverty level, you are seeing more crime, more murders across every group, but you're also seeing that even at the lowest level of poverty, blacks are above every other group. So this is showing you that per 100,000, or 10%, when 10% of the population is black, it's about 12%. Well, not black, but when 10% of the population is poor and they're black, it's about 12 out of 100,000. But when 25% of the population is poor and it's black, the murder rate is all the way up to 36. So as you can see, as you're going up in poverty, you're also going up in crime. And you can also see that regardless of race, the blacks are kind of off the charts with murder. So the murder is a problem. This, I believe someone who is conservative must have posted this because it's highlighting specifically whites versus blacks. And what it's showing everybody is, okay, these are the income levels. And it's basically saying that the poorest whites are committing murder at 7 out of 100,000. And it's saying that the wealthiest blacks are committing murder at 15.4. So basically, when you look at the group of the wealthiest blacks in America, they're actually committing more murder. Well, they're committing murder at a higher rate than even the poorest whites. So just looking at the raw data, you have to admit that there's not crime, but there's a murder problem in the black community if your most wealthiest group of people that are black are committing murders at a higher rate than the poorest group of whites. Again, I think this was posted by someone racist because they didn't even mention that Asians are committing crime at a lesser rate than whites. They didn't highlight that. So if you look at the chart, you'll see that Asians start off at 3 in 100,000, which is very low. And as they go up in wealth, it drops to under 1 in 100,000, which is incredible. Good job, Asians. Well, not incredible, but good. And this is just a diversity map, which would better illustrate what I've been saying so far throughout the episode. As you can see, the blacks, as we said, I say the blacks. The blacks live in the South, and if per capita, if you look at the homicide rate, generally speaking, the murders are happening in the South. And then the next place that murders are happening is on the West Coast, and on the West Coast, it's Hispanics. So the highest percentage of murders is happening in the South, and then the second highest percentage of murders is happening in the Southwest, and that's where the Hispanics are. Last episode, I also talked about IQ. So I talked about fluid IQ, the standard IQ, and also GIQ. So this time we're going to discuss GIQ, which is more like your standardized test. So this particular screenshot is the ACT. And it also converts the ACT scores to an IQ score for people. So this graph is basically showing you everyone's score. The top of the graph is going to be your average. So when fools like Nick Fuentes say that average IQ of blacks is 85, I think this one says it's 88. What he's talking about is the average. Every black person's IQ is not 85. This graph is showing you that it's going up as high as 130 for blacks. It goes as low as 60. But this is saying that in 2024, for the representative sample size or sample group, the average IQ for the blacks was 88. The average IQ for whites was 100. And they set the standard to 100. I know last episode I said whites were at 103, but I'm assuming for this particular study that they did, they just converted everything to make whites the standard. So whites are 100, Hispanics are 91, Asians are 108. That's similar to what I said last episode. And so that people can see that this is not something that was a one-time thing. In 2023, similar numbers. Whites again at 100 because they set it as the standard. Blacks 86 didn't do as well. Hispanics 89 also didn't do as well. Well, 89.9, okay, they did 90. And then the Asians again 107. So as you can see, this is not something that generally has changed. It didn't change much 2023 to 2024. And I've been looking at these numbers for not looking at them but looked at the numbers over the course of 50 years, and it hasn't changed much. It did change a little bit 50 years ago, and I believe that happened because I guess next time I'll have to go look into that as well. But my perspective is that the reason there was a change about 30 to 50 years ago was because they had Jim Crow. So at one point, blacks weren't getting the same opportunities as whites. So because they were getting different books, different lessons, less quality education offered to them, they weren't scoring where they're capable of scoring. But now that we've adjusted for that as a society and we no longer have Jim Crow because of Brown Board of Education and other civil rights improvements, I believe that we're now seeing, what the groups are capable of. And because of those improvements, blacks are able to show where they are and they're doing better. I also just wanted to show an image of the IQ in Europe, because a lot of times when we're talking about black and white, it's coming across like I'm saying, because you're white, you're this, and because you're black, you're this. And that's actually not what I'm saying. This shows that in Europe, there's a range of IQ levels. Everyone in this map is white. There are no black people. Well, there are no black people, but the majority of the people that they're testing are white. So as you can see from looking at this, the Northern Europeans are in the hundreds, high 90s, and the Western Europeans are also in the high, the Northern Western Europeans are in the high 90s to 100s. Now, as you go south, you start to notice mid 90s. So that's what I was talking about, Hispanic people. They're 93, the Italians 94, Spain and Portugal 94. And then when you go over to the southeastern Southeastern Europe, you start to see the scores you see with black people. You start to see 90, 87. I mean, you see 82. I'm not sure what country this is, but this is lower than the blacks and they're white. So I don't believe that we can judge people just off their race clearly. If within the white race there is a range, within the black race there is a range. And it's not a stereotype, but it's more just a general statement when you start comparing blacks versus whites. We can't draw too much from just the race of an individual. As we see, some people call the Southeast Europe the niggas of Europe because they're scoring like niggas. Didn't realize I had this pulled up, but we'll just discuss it since it's here. This is showing the SAT scores, and it kind of falls in line with the same thing we've been seeing across the races. It has male and female. I have not dived into that. Maybe another episode I will, and it's saying who scores what on the SAT. Since I've been talking about Asians, African Americans, Hispanics, and whites, I will just say that 1400 to 1600, it's 27% of Asians who take the SAT are scoring at the highest level, 14 to 1600. For African Americans, blacks, it's 1%. That's a very big difference. If 1% of your population is scoring there, and 25% of another group's population is scoring there. In comparison, the Hispanics are scoring 2% there. Similar to the blacks, there's a larger difference from the Asians. And as you can see from this, whites is 7% at 14 to 1600. So when these people are talking about blacks on social media, I just want to point out that African Americans, Hispanics, and whites are not scoring at the top for the SAT. That is something that is primarily Asians. I got to work on these tangents, but whatever comes up on the screen, I tell y'all what I think.